Okie dokie, Smokey. Let's get started. So unless you have like a USB microphone, in which case you wouldn't need an audio interface is the most important part of your home studio. Let's compare it to anatomy. If we're going to compare things to parts of your body, the USB interface is going to be your heart. The DAW is going to be your brain. The microphone would be like your hands, I guess. Boom arm would be your arm. Well, the metaphor kind of breaks down. Anyways, yeah, the heart of your studio, audio interface. An audio interface's job is to take a microphone signal or an instrument signal, otherwise known as instrument and microphone level, otherwise known as really quiet signals, and amplify it through a preamp, those little knobs that you turn. And then it takes that analog signal and converts it to digital, and it does that through sample rate and bit depth. Then once the signal path has been converted to a digital representation, it goes into your DAW and then comes back into the audio interface and out through speakers. Therefore, it goes through a digital to analog conversion. Analog to digital on the way in, digital to analog on the way out to go back to your speakers. In addition to that, any audio interface is going to include what's called a MIDI out and a MIDI in. This is how you send information to a synthesizer or any other MIDI instrument so you can play it and then send it back to the DAW. In essence, an audio interface is a preamp and an analog to digital or digital to analog converter all in the same box. Now in larger, more robust studios, you're going to find these are going to be separate units. In this way, larger studios have an advantage because they can choose whatever preamp they want. If they want it to be a really old vintage preamp, a tube preamp, a solid state transformer preamp, these are all things that they can choose in order to customize their studio to their liking. See, every preamp is going to have a different quality to it. They color the signal less or they color the signal more. Electric guitarists out there, you're going to understand this analogy. You can think of the electric guitar and the microphone in the same way that you can think of the amplifier and the preamp. The amplifier of an electric guitar signal is going to have just as much influence over the signal itself as the guitar does, if not more. Same can be said of a microphone preamp. The microphone is going to change the quality of the sound depending on what preamp you use to amplify. Okay, why are we talking about external preamps? This is about audio interfaces. Well, a common complaint you'll find among producers is that standalone USB interfaces have sort of a overly transparent or overly clinical preamp. This means you'll find that USB interfaces oftentimes just bring up the audio signal to the loudness it needs to be without necessarily coloring it in a really stylized fashion. Don't freak out though.
Oh, I gotta get the most expensive thing. I gotta go get all the analog gear. I need tubes. I always need
I don't know, man. Everyone thinks they need tubes in all of their audio gear. This is where things like emulations, plug-in emulations come in. You'll find things like the Apollo series, or really any UA device, universal audio device. They're going to have different plugins that come with their products that emulate old gear. This makes a preamp extremely flexible because oftentimes these plugins are really accurate. But beyond that, beyond just the taste of a preamp, there's a few things you need to keep in mind whenever you are considering an audio interface. Okay, I live in Spain. I live in an apartment with no AC and it's summer, so I'm gonna get a little sweaty. You need to take into consideration the preamp quality and the preamp gain that's going to come with your audio interface. And then you need to take into consideration the gain required for your specific microphone. For example, a lot of people, particularly voiceover artists, podcasters, and streamers, really like the SM7B. Like, obsess over it as if no other mic exists. When the microphone I'm talking into right now, by the way, is very similar in tone. It's called the Shure SM57, and it's $100. It's way cheaper. But a lot of people like the SM7B, and the SM7B takes 59 dBs of gain in order to bring up to proper levels. Now, the Scarlett audio interface, which is one of the most popular ones, I own a version of it, the Scarlett 18i20, they have around 55 dBs of gain, which means they aren't going to bring the Shure SM57 to peaking at proper gain levels around -12 dB. Now, I've done videos to show that you can get a nice signal out of the SM7B without necessarily getting external gain like a cloud lifter, but the only issue is it involves a lot of processing, meaning you're going to do things like parallel compression, you can be working with a gate, you'll need to EQ some of the noise out of it that comes with noisy preamps, but all of these things can be solved if you buy an interface with the proper levels of gain. And to be honest, they aren't necessarily bound by certain price points. For example, the Behringer UMC202HD, while they may not be the highest quality of preamps, and in that way you may introduce more noise into your audio signal, they do have enough gain to power it to proper audio levels. Or you could spend more and get something like the Motu M2, which is again going to bring it up to the proper level of gain because it has the preamp gain needed. I'm going to show you my preamp, the Scarlett 18i20, which happens to be a larger version of the Scarlett 2i2. They have essentially the same mic pre's. Let's show you the amount of noise I get on this microphone if I crank the preamp up to 100%. Volume warning. Now, not only am I getting more preamp noise, I'm also getting more room noise, more noise coming from outside the building. These are all things that are going to get much more apparent if you need to crank it higher. So the more room you have, the quieter your signal, the cleaner the signal. I'm going to show you what you get if you happen to spend a little bit more on like a rack unit or happen to spend a little bit more so you don't just get, the basic 2 inputs, headphone output, that's it. Oftentimes you're going to get features like a pad or an instrument level signal. You're going to get things like an extra headphone output. With the Scarlett 18i20, you're going to get 8 analog microphone inputs. You're also going to get a number of different outputs. You get 2 standard monitor outputs and then an extra 8, making a total of 10 outputs that you can route in whatever way you want. You could have things paired to another stereo pair of speakers. You could have a bunch of different monitors in your signal. And then you get things like a live leveling display. You get an extra headphone output, and you get a lot of dimming switches that you can use on the main monitor path and on the incoming signals. Now, let's talk about some recommendations I have for the audio interface that you happen to choose. Now, the Scarlett series is really popular, and I'm not really sure why. They are great, but they're not necessarily better than a lot of the other options out there. They're pretty average in my opinion. And the reason I say they're average is nothing to do with their build quality or their audio quality. I think it's great. I think it's perfectly fine to use. It's the preamp gain. Ideally, I would like to see more preamp gain. Anything above 65 would be awesome, and more usable for more options in terms of the microphone. This is why I would recommend something like the Motu M2, something like the Behringer UMC202HD. If you're on a budget, be careful with those preamps. Their qualities are probably going to be pretty shoddy. And then if we're looking at the same price range as the Scarlett series, the PreSonus 24C is great. And then if you have a little bit more money to spend, anything that Universal Audio makes, choice. Things like the Apollo Twin or the rack mounted unit. And that's all. I hope this was informative. It was kind of more of a discussion based video. Leave your opinions in the comment down below with whatever audio interface you prefer. If you've had any bad experiences with any of these interfaces, let me know. Follow me on Instagram at AudioHaze. If you want lessons, I have a degree in music production and technology, and I've been playing guitar for over 10 years. I can teach both music production and guitar. With that, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.